Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. Today I'm doing a full review on this watch here, a Pagani Design 1680. Now this watch, when it came out, I was really interested in. However, there was two reasons why I thought I would never buy it. Firstly, it was much more expensive than the other Pagani Design watches, and when I looked at reviews of it, people were saying it was very good, but it really felt fairly similar quality to other Pagani Design watches. And when they were asking more money than their normal range, it sort of outpriced it for me. For that sort of style, that sort of quality, that sort of brand, I'd certainly probably look elsewhere. But since coming out, they have dropped in price. They've dropped back, especially whilst on sale, down to sort of a more affordable price or more within the Pagani Design price range. A price range which I'm much more comfortable paying for a Pagani Design watch. Secondly, I got the feeling that it was a very large watch. I'm not sure why. I think perhaps the style of it, the angles of it, and that sort of put me off a little bit as well. What I can say before we even jump into the review is that it actually fits quite well. It is not a huge watch. It just has that sort of wrist presence about it. So obviously, if you haven't seen this watch before, this one here is a homage to a Grand Seiko. It is quite an interesting angular style of watch, and it is quite an interesting watch to wear. Now guys, before we jump into the full review, if you haven't clicked on that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it if you did so. But let's flip the camera around now and let's check out this Pagani Design Grand Seiko homage. So here we have the Pagani Design, the Grand Seiko homage, the PD1680. This one coming with the NH35 for 185 Australian dollars. Now, packaging exactly what you expect from Pagani Design. This one comes with actually a pretty good sort of strap here. For me, it's probably going to be a little bit short, but it does feel quite good. Not my sort of style of strap generally, so I haven't been wearing it on that one. I've been wearing it on the bracelet it comes with. As you also expect, polishing cloth and all the little bits of literature that you don't tend to look at with these watches. But inside, we have a lovely homage to that Grand Seiko. So the two things that initially put me off about buying this watch, firstly was the price that they were initially asking. That has now dropped considerably, much more of a correct price for this watch now. And secondly was my perceived opinions of the size of it. If you look at it, it looks like a big chunky watch, but in reality, it's actually not that big. It sort of disguises its size a little bit, just like a Seiko does quite often. Although the case is 44 millimeters, it is 12.7 millimeters thick. The lug-to-lug is 47 millimeters, but it has that a slightly effective lug of 51.8 millimeters because they sort of are male links, but if you look at them, they have this massive downturn. So it sort of helps with that turning and fitting a smaller wrist. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. And on the supplied bracelet, fitting my 6 3/4 inch wrist, removing about 4 links, 164 grams. The dial here is covered by a flat piece of sapphire crystal, and it is a nice piece of crystal actually. It feels really nice under finger. The dial, you are sort of expecting a similar type of dial from a lot of these Pagani Design watches, and that's not a bad thing, but that is exactly what you're getting. So you're getting what you sort of expect from a Pagani Design. You're getting that sort of matte coloured black dial. You're getting printing in white of the logo, the name, automatic, water resistant, 20 bar, 200 meters. You have a minute track printed on the outside, and at the hours a slightly bigger dot. You have applied indices all the way around, except there at the 4 o'clock where we have a framed date window. That's not collar matched, as you can see, which is a tiny bit disappointing, but not too much of a bad thing because it sort of fits in relatively well within this dial. All those surrounds to those indices are polished, just like the hands on this as well. Polished stainless steel, loom filled, indices are loom filled, lollipop balance to that second hand. And how is that loom that we are talking about? Well, it's exactly what we expect from Pagani Design. It's okay, it's not fantastic, it's sort of what we expect. If you particularly love your loom, probably don't buy a Pagani Design. If it's sort of okay, if you don't mind having a little bit of loom, but you're not too worried about it being perfect, then Pagani Design is going to be an option for you. One of my favourite parts of the watch, however, is the bezel and this little stainless steel insert that is within the bezel. That is stationary, where you move the bezel around it. Bezel action is not too bad. It's a little bit light. You can move it with one finger. I'm not too concerned about knocking it, but it's probably a little bit lighter than I would like. It does have a nice noise to it, however. There is a little bit of backplay, a little bit of movement, but I'm pretty sure this one actually lines up pretty well. Yeah, lines up nicely. Pagani Design is getting better with bezel action, as I've noticed over the years. Certainly it is feeling a little bit better. It certainly does line up a little bit better, but still not absolutely perfect. But I don't expect that from a Pagani Design, and having that knowledge, having that expectation that's not going to be perfect means that I'm not then disappointed with the watch. But for me, this watch is all about the angles of the case and also of the bracelet. Fits in really well to this particular watch. It's quite an interesting one. Let's have a look. We have some brushed surfaces mixed in with some polished surfaces. We have brushed all the way across the side, brush on the other side. We have a signed screw down crown. It is at the 4 o'clock, as you can see. Obviously being screwed down, it gives it that 200 meters of water resistance. Having that Seiko NH35 movement, it gives you hand winding as well as hacking. And as always, I do like to put all of my watches on a time grapher, even though we have seen many of these Seiko NH35 movements before. Let's see how this one is performing. Well, there's a particularly reasonable set of numbers, aren't there? 21,600 vibrations per hour, which is exactly what you expect from this movement. Beat error 0.4, a little bit higher than I would have liked, but anything under 1 is fine. Amplitude 247, that's great. I'm happy with that. Rate plus 5 seconds a day. Really, at this sort of price range, you can't ask for much more than that. But let's have a little bit more of a closer look at this case and the bracelet, because that is what makes it for me. It reminds me a little bit of my Seiko Sumo with all those different angles, especially on the lug. And you can see that light play is really nice as well because of those sort of brushed and polished surfaces that are on there. Very angular, very cool. Bit of a downturn there on the lugs, which I quite like. It's nice to have a bit of downturn. Again, because it sort of feels like a bigger watch, having some downturn certainly helps with the fitting to your wrist. And have a look at those solid end links. Wow, they are chunky and amazing. And probably the best ones I've seen on a Pagani Design from a look, fit and finish. Fits particularly well into the case and really does sort of suit this watch. Those angles on the lugs and then the angles onto those end lugs, very cool. And see how that center piece there, that sort of male end link, it's sort of like almost an extra bit added in. It's quite cool and really does come down on an angle. Now, there is a mixture of brushed and polished surfaces on the bracelet itself. You'll see all brushed except for these 2 lines of polished there, which then really looks really good when you then sort of go brushed, polished, brushed, polished, and then brushed and then polished onto the case as well. Very, very cool. Polished on the side, we have screw links, which is exactly what we're expecting from Pagani Design, and a clasp that we are absolutely expecting from Pagani Design. Certainly something that I've seen before. Pagani Design written on there, brushed, twin pushers, 3 levels of micro adjust. Probably could have used a 4th, but for me, I've got a good fit. Hit those, nice milled inner clasp, fantastic. And of course, their required cheap looking diver's extension there. Again, I'm not taking a Pagani Design diving, however, I guess it doesn't hurt, it just tucks away there. And we've got one of those case backs that we're sort of starting to see now on more and more of the Pagani Designs. It's like a bit of an oceanscape there. The only difference with this one, if you look at that center ring where the picture is, it's slightly raised. I haven't seen that before. Normally they're completely flat with all those information and that sort of picture put on. This one, there's a slight raised inner circle, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure if that's just a different style of case back that they're doing, or if it's something they need for this particular one. I don't know. Obviously, it's a screw down case back as well, allowing with that better water resistance. But overall, I just really quite like the look of that bracelet, and those end links are particularly interesting. There is a fault with them though, and that's a little bit unfortunate, and it's probably going to be one of my only negatives of this particular watch. But what is that? Well, to do and see what the fault is, we're going to have to put it on wrist. And here we have it on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. Now, I do like wearing my watches a little bit loose, so you can see it does move back and forth a little bit. It actually fits quite well, and it's amazing that larger size, or at least that perception of a larger size, fits very nice to that 6 3/4 inch wrist. But when we're looking down the length of the arm, it fits nicely, but see what that end link is doing. It's coming down almost too far and then having to kick out the bracelet. And when you're looking down the watch, you really do see it come down, stop, and then come out at a different angle. And that's not ideal. So for me, this watch would actually be better on a smaller wrist. A bigger watch for a smaller wrist. It's the first time I think I've ever come across that. And it's only because of that slightly interesting or weird end link. I think it's a very cool looking end link. It just makes it sit a little bit strangely on wrist. Realistically, I'm not noticing it day to day as I'm wearing the watch, but when you are looking at it from a more of a review style, you're certainly seeing that and thinking, some people are not going to like that as much. But as I said, if you have a smaller wrist, it would actually work quite well because you want that sort of to flow away and flow down from the watch head itself. So what do I like about this watch? What don't I like about it? And what would I change? Well, I think what I do like about it most, as I mentioned, that interesting case design. I really like those sharp angles. I've noticed in my collection with my Seiko Samurai, with my Seiko Sumo, I like those interesting sort of facets to the case. Even my Hamilton Jazzmaster has a really interesting section where the lugs jump on, and I really like that sort of little bit interest factor to the case. Size, dimensions, angles, something a little bit about that. It gives it a bit of wow factor for me. Even though it has a bit of a weird end link, I still think it's kind of cool. I quite like it. And it overall is quite a good bracelet. Very comfortable as well, and there's no issues with the fit or the finish of this one as well. Very nice and comfortable on wrist. Looks quite cool, doesn't it? And I think it sits nicely on wrist, apart from that little weird angle there, and I like the weight of this watch as well. And of that dial, I do like the hands. I think they're kind of funky, a little bit different to other watches that I've had in my collection. However, I do think it probably is a slightly polarizing watch. So from a negative, I guess not everybody's going to like the looks of this one. Now, I don't mind it. I don't love it, but I don't mind it. I have to admit, I like looking at the watch more this way than I do this way, and that is probably not ideal when it comes to ownership of a watch. However, I don't mind it, but I can certainly see why some people may not like the look of this one. What would I change about it? Well, I'd love for that end link to still have that interesting funky look, but maybe sit out a little bit further so I don't get that weird angle there. That's a little bit of a disappointment to it. And obviously when it comes to Pagani Design watches, the lume is not always the best. However, overall, I think you are going to get a reasonable watch, especially if you get this one on special. But to talk a little bit more and give you my final thoughts, let's flip the camera around, let's get back to me, and I'll talk to you a little bit more. So overall, I think it's a really good watch, but there is one thing that absolutely shines through with this one. Do not pay the full retail of this watch. Do not pay over 200 Australian dollars. Not because it's a bad watch, it's just not worth that extra money. At that sort of price, really we should probably be looking at other watches, not so much Pagani Design. But when this one is on sale, and when sometimes it drops quite considerably on those AliExpress sales, then this one really becomes a worthwhile watch to look at. I think it is very nice, especially if you like the watch that it is homaging. And guys, if you are interested in the watch, I'm going to leave one of those AliExpress affiliate links down below. If you click on it, I will earn a small amount of commission if you decide to purchase the watch. And I really do appreciate it if you do choose to do that. All that money goes back into me buying some more watches that I can then wear, enjoy, and feature on my channel. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope to see you in the next one.